If you're brilliant at your job but still feel a step behind in your career, the missing piece might not be confidence. It might well be context. Great careers aren't built in the big moments alone. They're built in everyday choices, bold little moves, and gutsy next steps. Welcome to Little Moves, Big Careers. Let's dive straight in. Hello. I'm Caroline Esterson, your host, and welcome back to the show for quietly brilliant women finding their feet in corporate leadership. This show is about the daily habits that compound to build unshakable confidence so you can finally perform like the leader that you already are. And by the end of today's episode, you'll understand why technical expertise alone rarely leads to promotion and what senior leaders are actually looking for. How widening your business lens instantly makes you more valuable in meetings, decisions, and conversations. And finally, the simple curiosity habit that helps people move from task doers to strategic thinkers. So let's start with something that might feel a little uncomfortable. A lot of the conversations around women in careers tends to focus on confidence. Things like speak up more, believe in yourself more, back yourself more. But what if confidence isn't actually the missing piece of the jigsaw? I had the great pleasure of catching up with a remarkable young woman who I just love working with. She's smart, considered, and has oodles of empathy. In my conversation with Emma Fraser, she said something that really made my radar start to twitch. She said organizations don't just value people who are good at their jobs, they value people who understand the bigger picture, people who can connect the dots. Do you fancy a listen? Here's an extract from our conversation. Emma, I'd really like to start off with thinking about organizations. What are the things that you think organizations value in people these days?
Good question. So I think what organisations value is business context and industry understanding. So the ability to be able to have a good view of the landscape and then connect all the different dots. So not just about being technically competent, but it's understanding the landscape in which you're working within. And then I think second, and this isn't just for today, I think I've experienced this throughout my full career in the world of work, is networking and relationship building. And I always think it's not what you know, but who you know. And if you have people that are backing you and talking about you in the rooms about what you've done and what you've demonstrated, my experience is that travels far louder than when even you advocate for yourself. And so I think that kind of business commercial acumen and then the relationship and the networking ability for me is key. And it's all about those like dots and connections that you get that drive careers forward.
Love the way that you've explained that, because we often talk about pattern spotting, and it is a little bit about pattern spotting, isn't it? It's kind of like, where does this make sense? The world is so busy and crazy, isn't it? It's being able to sift through the noise and work out what's really important. So if we take them one by one, the business context and industry understanding, that for me is really interesting, because I think we encourage people to focus on the technical expertise, don't we, to dig deeper. But actually, you're talking about extending it breadth-wise. It's understanding where this bit fits in the bigger world of work. Do you think that's always been the case?
So I think it's always been there to some extent, but I think where it's become more poignant is because the world is changing so fast. So I think a lot of people in business right now will put a plan in place, and then consumer demands will change, the economy will change, like politics, there's so many factors are so rapidly changing that your plans need to be more agile than they've ever been. And I think to stop people working in the place where they're just doing what they've always done because they've always done it, is it then allows you the space to think about the outcomes and what is it that you're actually trying to do and why are you trying to do it. But I think it's the pace of change that's making it more important than ever.
Yeah, and that's only going to get faster, isn't it? Can you remember where you were in your career when you kind of had that, this is interesting, when you noticed that this was really important?
So I think it was I got given a really great opportunity to be a business analyst, and it was working for a divisional manager in retail. And the reason that he done it was because he had spotted me as talent, and what he wanted to do was give me like exposure of the business wide landscape. And I didn't realize that's what he was doing at the time because he didn't frame it that way. But as I started to look at and analyze essentially the business on the grand scale, and then look at the market and the industry and what was that doing and how was that influencing it, it then made me start connecting the dots of why I was doing what I was doing up until that point in my career, maybe much more intentional. And I could see like, and it was like almost he put me on like a springboard that I'd done this for a year, and it accelerated my understanding, because I don't think you can teach like business understanding or industry understanding. It's through exposure and yeah, exposure and exploration really. But you need to, I think, have that want to explore and be curious. But that was definitely the point where I was like, okay, widen my gaze, and then I can start to think a bit more long term. I can start to put all the jigsaw puzzle pieces together rather than just working on an activity because either I've been told to do it, or because someone thinks it's a great idea, or because I think it's a great idea, but actually connecting it to genuine driving business performance.
Really, really interesting. There's so much going on in my head right now. Everything you said, I think, because I want to come back to the networking bit, because I think, isn't
Hmm.
that a lovely example of, because you are really strong at building relationships, your talent got spotted by somebody who then gave you the opportunity.
Hmm.
So I do definitely want to come back to that. But if we
Yeah.
stick with the business understanding side of things first, one of the things that you said is that you can't be taught this. You've got to want
Mm.
it. Now that is fascinating, because we would like to think, wouldn't we, that we can teach, both of us live
Yes.
in the world of L&D.
Yes.
We'd like to think that we could teach people everything. But it absolutely does have to be a desire. And it's about the way that your brain's wired, isn't it? And you can train it yourself, but you can't make somebody want to do it.
Yeah, uh-huh. And I think it's that curious mindset of like looking at everything and like going, where did that come from? What's making that work? What sits behind that? And it's having all these questions. And that's what I think that you could teach somebody a moment in time and what's going on. But then as soon as they walk out the door, the world will have moved on and there'll be something else at play. And yeah, I think it comes down to like just questioning and being curious and showing up with like almost like what's the wonder of the world almost.
Yeah, yeah, like that. The wonder of the world. And I think with the pace of what the world's changing so
Hmm.
quickly, you talked about curiosity.
Yeah.
Have you always been curious? Have you been that little kid that was asking why, or is that something that you've developed as your career's grown?
So I think that I've always been curious and I love to like challenge myths. So one of the things that I've always I don't know if it always or maybe just in my working career, but when someone says like the business says, or like they'll name someone, they say, or this is the way that is, I'm like, oh, what makes them say that? Or I'll go and ask the question to the person, and then it's like mythbusters that I enjoy doing, and it never is what like it's went down the line from people saying one thing or another. So I think I've always wanted just to challenge like what people are saying and get behind it and think about like the why. Like I've never really been motivated by just following rules or doing what people tell me to do. Like I've always been someone that just like pushes. Like if someone says, "Well, you can't do that," I'm like, "Okay, why not? Like what's behind that? What will happen if I don't do that? If I do it or don't do it?" So I think that the curiosity has come probably from wanting to always push the boundaries, like never wanting to be put in a box, and then that's developed in career. That then when I've realised, you need to be curious to be really effective. It's then probably more intentional. One thing I'd say though is I think today being curious is really, really difficult though. And the reason I say that is because
Okay.
I think the world's moving so fast. and we're responding slash reacting to a lot of things, it's so easy to be head down and get on the hamster wheel of going like one thing after the other. And then you almost like get flung out the hamster wheel and you think, gosh, where is everything in the world going and what's it doing? So it's I think it's a really interesting dynamic that there's this need to be more curious and to understand like company context wider, broader, the industries wider, broader, the world. But I also think that the pace of change is meaning that a lot of people are on the hamster wheel, including me at points. And what that then means is that you then don't spend the time being as curious as probably should be. And I just think it's a really interesting dynamic right now.
It is a really interesting dynamic, and it makes me think that if organizations really value that curiosity, and I think that they
Mm,
do, how do we program it in as part of the system?
yes.
It's got to be part of everything that we do,
Hmm.
doesn't it? Team meetings, how do you pique that curiosity?
Hmm.
One-to-ones, how do you pique the curiosity? Performance reviews, any of those people
Yeah.
moments, what is it that leaders can do to encourage that depth of thinking? I
Hmm.
think the other side of it that comes to mind is that I think you have to be quite brave to challenge, like you're talking about, Emma,
Hmm.
don't you? It's,
Yeah.
to challenge a boss or somebody with perceived expertise about like, that's really interesting. Why
Hmm.
is it that you say that? Or why is it that we should do that? That does need a degree of bravery from people.
Hmm. I think though the bravery is dependent on the risk that you see in the conversation. And I think the way that I look at it is it's risk free because you're just asking a question. You're not challenging someone's view. You're not saying, I'm not going to, or like, I don't agree with you. You're just asking the question. And I think that's the way that I've always looked at it. So it hasn't felt brave because I'm just genuinely wanting to understand. I'm not there to challenge or to like get into a big debate. I'm just wanting to understand. And I think when the intent starts with that, it doesn't actually feel like a brave thing to do because it's just understanding. Whereas I think if we go into it seeing it as challenge, then yeah, that does feel brave. Like it feels brave to go, right, I'm going to, go into this conversation and maybe dispute like in someone's opinion on something. That
Language
maybe
is
takes
really
a bit more
interesting, isn't it?
bravery.
You talk about wanting to understand compared to dispute.
Yeah,
Dispute is such a hard word, isn't it? So you're
Mm-hmm.
absolutely right. It's what we're saying to ourselves
Yeah.
and the messages in our own head about why we're doing what we're doing. And I think as long as you are going in with that positive intent, nobody can question it,
Mm-hmm.
really, can they?
No.
Fabulous. So that wider business context and understanding is key, and that really is about understanding. It's like I see it like building blocks or stepping stones. If you're in a bubble just merrily doing your own thing on your hamster wheel, how do you know whether you're doing the right thing? How do you know whether you need to divert or pivot or whatever language you want to put around it? But if you've got that business understanding and you're starting to see what's going on outside the business and you're genuinely thinking about how that might impact the business, that makes you really valuable.
Yeah,
Because
and I also think it makes you a really good teammate as well. Because I think that when you're in your own wee world, doing your part, then it's like, where's the dependencies? Like, who are you impacting elsewhere, positively, negatively, unaware or aware? And I do think there's also just that level of um, good collaboration that it brings that when you widen rather than focus deep. And obviously, there is need to still have depth to technical expertise, but I think that breadth is so important.
So what did you think of that? Isn't she amazing? Emma talked about a moment early in her career when a leader spotted potential in her and moved her into a business analyst role. At the time, she didn't even realize what was happening, but suddenly she was looking at the business, the market, industry trends, performance patterns, and something shifted. She wasn't just doing work anymore. She was understanding why the work mattered. And that exposure accelerated her thinking dramatically. It's moments like these that change careers. So let's take a minute to reflect on what this actually means for you. Take a moment and ask yourself, 1, how far does my current thinking stretch? Am I mostly thinking about my tasks, teams, my immediate deliverables? Or am I regularly thinking about the wider business, customer behaviour, market changes and strategic outcomes? 2, could you explain how your work drives business results, not just what you do, but why it matters? That's the language that leaders are listening for. And number 3, are you stuck on that hamster wheel? Emma describes something so clearly that most of us will recognise. Work is moving so fast that we become incredibly efficient, but not necessarily more strategic, because busy is not the same as being valuable.
Small shifts, sharp impact. These are quick-fire career moves, real things you can do before your next coffee refill.
So if you want to widen your thinking this week, try these. Number 1, ask one bigger picture question in your next meeting. Try something like, how does this connect to the wider business priorities? You'll be amazed at how rarely people ask that. Number 2, follow one external signal. Read one industry article, listen to one market insight, listen to the news, think about what this means for your business and your job. Notice one trend affecting your organisation, because leadership's thinking starts with awareness. And number 3, trace your work back to impact. Instead of saying, I prepared a report, try saying, this report helped the team decide X. That language is so much more strategic too, isn't it? Now, here's the interesting twist. Thinking strategically is powerful, but that is only half the story. Because even when you do brilliant work and think strategically, just as Emma said right at the start, your career still moves through people. Your reputation travels through conversations, and opportunities often come from rooms that you're not even in. And that's exactly what Emma and I talk about next. The next episode is why connection is currency and how careers actually move through relationships. And it drops on Wednesday. There'll be the final episode in this trio on Friday. And remember, in the meantime, make your move, even if it's tiny, especially if it's tiny. I'll see you in a couple of days.